As geopolitical issues become part of boardroom conversations, a deeper understanding of China's economic landscape is no longer optional. China in the Changing Geoeconomic Landscape is a 4-week fully virtual course by Takshashila Institution on how China is reshaping trade, finance, and global power. You'll unpack China's rise, its economic model, de risking, trade as strategy, and Beijing's push to reform the global financial order. Applications close on 20th January 2026. Apply now.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. My name is Malathi Renati, and I head the policy school at the Takshashila Institution. And today I wanted to explore the journey of the state of parasport in our Indian sports ecosystem. And to explore this journey, what has worked, what hasn't, what needs to change, we're joined by someone who has lived this transformation from the inside. I'm happy to welcome Manasi Joshi. She's a para athlete and a former world number one in women's para-badminton. She's a 2019 world champion in the SL3 category, a para Olympian, an Asian medalist. She received many recognitions, including the Arjuna Award in 2022, the National Award for Best Sports Person with Disability, BBC's 100 Women, and she was one of Time's Next Generation Leaders. While she continues to play actively at the elite level, she's also a strong advocate for inclusive sport, leads initiatives that kind of provide advanced prosthetics and physiotherapy to amputees. So thank you very much, Manasi, for making the time from your busy training schedule to be part of this podcast.
Thank you, Malathi.
So this podcast, broadly, the flow would be where we're looking at things starting with respect to the government's involvement in parasport. Then we look at where the markets should be stepping up and how society can play a larger role. So that's the flow of the podcast. But first things first, let's hear from Manasi about her journey, what made her take to sport and badminton at that.
So I started playing para-badminton after my injury, after a road accident. First beginning, it was to just pursue a rehabilitation, like to quicken my recovery, to learn how to balance, because I used to be a badminton player even before my injury. In my school and my college and my corporate, I used to represent. And post my injury, I picked the sport up just for fun and for recovery, as I said. But I started actually I started this sport especially in 2014, that is 2.5, 3 years after my injury, when I participated for the first time at national level and then at international level. And since 2015, I'm representing India at various competitions. In the rise of para sports in the country, I've seen our sport, badminton, has become a Paralympic sport. It became a Paralympic sport last in Tokyo edition. And my women's single SL3 event became a part of Paralympics just at Paris. So I've seen it all, right from not having a sport at Paralympics to having the sport and then playing the sport. It has been a beautiful journey. Last year I played at Paris, and again I'm selected for World Championships, and I'll be playing this year and representing India at Worlds.
You're wonderful, Manasi. I think you're just an example of how you can, with resilience, right, you've overcome the challenges that you faced. So thanks, Manasi, for that. So as is evident, right, from what Manasi also mentioned, parasport in India has traveled a reasonably good distance, especially in a relatively short time. And I would say maybe over the last decade or so, more so. So just to give our listeners an idea of the history of parasports and the different policy instruments that have been used, I sort of cherry-picked a few milestones and critical developments since our independence in this, since India's independence, right, in this space. So I'd just like to kind of go over that before we head into what the Sarkar has been doing and the policies that are in place. So as you all know, 1900s is when the first modern day Olympics, that's for able-bodied, was introduced. But it was not until 1960 that the first Para-Olympics was actually came into being. 1968 at the Tel Aviv, India made its Summer Paralympics debut with a 10-member contingent. No medals there, but obviously a crucial international exposure. But it was not until the next Olympics, 1972, that we had Murlikant Patekar win India's first Paralympic gold, and this was in the 50-meter freestyle. He also set a world record, and that was just where India's medal thing started. But again, a long gap, nothing much done. But in 1994 is when there was a registration of the Paralympic Committee of India, the IPC. This was established as a dedicated national body to select, prepare, and field para-athletes. And it sort of coordinates with the International Paralympic Committee as well and advocates for resources and recognition. So this is in 1994. Again, there was a bit of a gap, not much happened. It was only in the early 2000s when things actually started moving forward. And 2004, Athens is where we actually, there's more recognition, where media kind of stepped in. We had Devendra Jajaria's gold in discus, Rajendra Singh's in powerlifting. And there's also at this point in time a call for parity with respect to incentives as given to able-bodied Olympic medalists. So call for parity with respect to funding, awards, and other things, right? That sort of, people started voicing that. But it was in the 2010s, sort of, it's let's say around 15 years ago, that state sports policies, and we need to keep in mind sport is a state subject, right, even in the constitution. So the state sports policies began adding para or special sports sections to their policies. So you would have seen at that point in time, the state level cash awards came in, incentives, and some infrastructure support came in. And this is another interesting development that happened in 2007, and I'd like to hear from you, Manasi, as well, maybe a little later, was the adoption of the IPC-aligned classification system, in which in para-athletes and other sports. So this essentially was a more sport-specific classification that followed global norms. India took to it, I guess, over a 3-year period between 2007 and 2010 when we adopted it. But before this, the classification in para-athletes globally and in India was one, more heterogeneous global bodies that were present, like for visual impairment, wheelchair, cerebral palsy. So each of this had their own class and category. And this used to vary based on the tournament, the event, and caused a lot of confusion. Just like how, Manasi, you mentioned about SL3, right? You have a category and that's the category you're going to be representing for any tournament, right? But in the past, that was not the case. That was also because predominantly medical condition-based grouping of athletes was by diagnostic labels, like, for example, the level of spinal cord injury, the type of amputation, or the visual impairment. So rather than by the functional impact on performance. So earlier in the past, it was more the medical. So this harmonization was a critical move because it sort of also showed there's a level playing field for athletes. But that's something I'd like to hear from you, Manasi, maybe a little bit later. So this happened in between 2007 and 2010. And then we noticed this is where the Sarkar, in terms of the policies, started bringing in more schemes and programs from 2014 onwards, around that time frame. There was a structural momentum followed where the TOPS, which is the Target Olympic Scheme, it included Parasports in 2020. Kalo India brought it in 2023. So very recent. You can see all of this is happening over the past 5 years. So it brings in para-athletes into a more organized ecosystem of coaching, equipment, competition exposure. So the Overton window, as we call it in policy, right? Overton window has started stretching, and parasports was now within acceptable politic narratives as well. Okay, and then in 2020, right, as Manasi also mentioned, that was a time when India went to Tokyo. This was again during the pandemic. We had a record 19 medal haul during that time. And Paris 2024 was where we had the highest ever Paralympic performance with a record 29 medals. That's been the highest. So the size of the India's Paralympic contingent grew from 10 athletes in 1968 to 54 in Tokyo 2020, and then 80 plus was the contingent size in Paris 2024. So this sort of mirrored also the investment and the talent identification over the recent past. But I think the most recent development has been with the National Sports Policy, the very recent one earlier this year, where it explicitly identifies persons with disabilities as a priority group. So there are committed, focused programs. There's more an inclusive infrastructure, and it's a part of the Pillar 3, Sports for Social Development. And this is a good move because it's now come into the policy parlance, so to speak. And likewise, even the National Sports Governance Act, which came in, which provides the statutory recognition and regulation of national sports bodies, including the National Para-Olympic Committee. It also mandates adherence to the Para-Olympic Charter. Okay, it embeds the Parasport governance in a more unified sort of a legal framework. So these are some of the, largely, as we can see, right, the public image too has shifted. Para athletes today are winning more world titles. Manasi Joshi herself has won the 2019 World Championship. We're also seeing para athletes topping global rankings and standing on para Olympic podiums. And but this progress has not been accidental, right, Manasi? So for all the medals and moments of pride, the ecosystem sort of still remains uneven, so to speak. So, Manasi, the question I have is, it's a sort of a three-part question. Where do you think the shift happened, right, for parasport in India? What has the government done right? And where do you think it's still falling short?
So I think thank you for sharing the whole history of parasports in India, and it has been very enlightening not only to me but to everybody who has been listening. For me, I feel personally, last few years have been, in last 10 years especially, we have seen a lot of growth of parasports in the country in terms of appreciation for para athletes, where para athletes have been winning medals, right from Deepa Malik winning in 2016 to many other athletes again. But the noise that has been generated around para sports has happened because of 2016. I mean, the first noise that you hear in the recent times has been, I feel from last one decade, it has been growing pretty well. But again, it's not just, I mean, the seeds have been sown pretty early and we can see the tree growing right now. I think what Devendra Jhanjhadiya Bhaiya had won in 2004. And I think after 2004, his event was not included at Paralympics. And thus, when next time his event got included again in 2016. So it's all about having those events for the category, for
Right.
that disability also makes a lot of difference. A lot of time we say, right, some sports are not a part of Olympic or Paralympic events. It's only because of maybe logistics.
Right.
Because that sport is not popular in that country, maybe. So there are a lot of different reasons why some events are added, some events do not get added, and sometimes some events are not added because there are not enough participation for that particular event, in spite of having a combination of classes. Now,
Could you explain the IPC a bit, how it was before, if you're aware, and how it has helped after the introduction? The IPC classification?
so IPC classification has been happening since past many years. I don't have the date and the historical data.
2007 is when it was introduced, yeah.
But what I know is the after classifications have become more and more scrutinized, more and more new categories have been added into para sports, especially para athletics. If you see, a lot of different disabilities have been included, right from people having visual impairment to people having different types of spinal cord injuries. And if you see para athletics, you will see one event which, just if you say long jump or 100 meters, it's been done, or 200 meters, it's for multiple categories. Now what is categories is, you are categorized into different, based on your disabilities, you are categorized into different classes. Now that is para athletics, which is one of the most popular events of para sports in when multi-sport events are happening. I play para badminton. Para badminton has a history of being a part of, first it was just it was a para badminton tournament. Right now, since 2000 and I think 11, the sport has been a part of BWF, Badminton World Federation, which is the same world body which is governing able-bodied badminton too. And since the introduction, our sport has been advocating for Paralympic introduction. And we got, in 2016, we came to know that para badminton will be included at Tokyo in 2020. And that was a very big win for para badminton too. Again, para badminton, for that purpose, for the introduction of para badminton into Paralympics, the blueprint of 2015 World Championship was taken into consideration based on the amount of, or the number of participation of athletes in that particular year for that particular tournament. And as you are aware that Olympics and Paralympics have a particular amount of bed numbers, and based on those bed numbers, actually the number of athletes that can be given an opportunity to participate, that number is determined. After that number is determined, particular number of sports are calculated and amount of seats to be given to those particular sports are then
Okay.
determined. So for para badminton, 120. Previously it was 90, now it's 120. That much amount of participation was permitted by IPC. Now we have total of 22 para badminton events in our para badminton circuit, out of
Okay.
which in last Paralympics, 14, last in the sense at
Nice.
Tokyo, we had 14 events, and here right now we have now 16 at
Okay.
Paris. So I think the amount of events have increased
Hmm.
based on the need and demand, and two women's singles categories had been added for Paris. So my
Right.
women's single SL3 and short height SH6, women's single SH3, SH6. These two events were introduced at Paris along with men's singles, which was already a part of it. And now for next Paralympics, again, there has been no addition of the events, but and also the number of participation will be 120. Total
Okay.
of
Nice.
total of three medals can be won: gold, silver, bronze. So amount of medals, amount of categories that exists are, I think, 450, more than 450 categories, or no, for more than
Hmm.
450 events are happening during Paralympic Games. And why I'm right now only talking about Paralympics, because these
Hmm.
are a multi-sport event and have the highest of honors of participation. But then there are other events like Asian Games and World
Right.
Championships, which are continental championships and world championships, which happen every 4 years. World championship are biannual, which happens every 2 years for para badminton.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm talking about, this is the data of para badminton about
Right.
amount
Right.
number of tournaments. We have total of six classes, that is six categories: wheelchair one, wheelchair two, SL3, SL4, SH6, and SU5. So total four standing classes and two wheelchair classes. We do not have badminton for visual impairment. We have hearing impairment badminton, but it comes into Deaf Olympics, which is a
Oh,
different event, which is not part of IPC, which is not
okay.
governed by IPC.
Right. So, Manasi, I'll just want to kind of was curious to know, so access to infrastructure for all of this, right? You described all the different type of categories, right? So in India too, this obviously access to the such infrastructure is very inconsistent. So maybe the elite athletes might be able to have a good access, but how do you? What's your take of the talent identification in India, right? In our sports pyramid. I know it's still concentrated in pockets rather than spread across districts and communities. But what's your take? I mean, how do you see it from somebody on the ground? Because for many athletes, the journey to elite sport continues to rely much on more personal resilience or on institutional support, right?
Correct.
So,
It is a
can
personal resilience. It's
you?
personal. I think an athlete is it is their determination, their resilience, which makes them take that opportunity of playing para sports. And in spite of taking that opportunity, playing the para sport, to pursue playing para sports, I think what has happened in last few years is, or I can just talk about, I understand the issue that government faces, especially, and I completely understand. The fact is, disability is not age specific. Now, a young child having disability can be congenital, or through injuries or through illness.
Right.
But those things can happen to anyone at any age. So, most of the sport, if you see, the starting age for playing that sport comes from childhood.
Hmm.
Talent identification happens from that
Very
age.
true.
But that doesn't work for para sports, because injuries can happen to anyone at any time. So that is one of the biggest challenge a country faces. Government, it's not our government; it's every government that faces. So that is one reason why we always see champions who come or who become champions on their own first, and then they start getting the government support.
Hmm.
Government understands this, but I think, again, we need a lot of incentives for people to train younger athletes with disabilities into the sport that they want first. And then, right now in India, our ideologies are कि medal आना चाहिए.
Hmm.
So they train this new thing which is happening, that they've started training athletes into sports which they feel we are going to
Chances.
get more medals. Yeah. But what if athlete doesn't want that? But then it has worked for China, I'm sure. Let's see how it works for our country too.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting, and as you mentioned, right, that the entry level here, right, could be at any age, and that's a very interesting perspective that that I think for all our listeners as well. So I think this is where the bazaar steps in, right? And I think the corporate interest, the sponsorship in parasport is sort of it's ironic, but it spikes during the visibility time when there's Paralympics or when there's the multi sport event happening. But how do we convert this attention into more sustained investment?
See, I feel since para sports are talked only during Paralympic events or during those 4 year cycles, it generates very less noise rest of the time. And
Mm,
because of that, athletes are remembered first for first few days and then they're forgotten. How much
right.
ever medals they win, how much ever biggest achievements they get, after a few years they're forgotten because media does not write about them. In spite of
Mhm.
like we keep on like I'm a badminton player, every few months I keep on traveling. Next year I'll be traveling every month. Now
Right.
media is not writing about my win every time I come home with a medal. They will only write and now I don't know why. So it's one thing is media
Mm,
has to generate noise around all the events that are happening. Second thing is people having developing those interests,
right. Right.
but that development of interest happens when there's a lot of data available for people to consume. Now, we
Mm.
don't have data available on websites on your chat. I think I love ChatGPT because you can just find whatever data you want, or all the AI tools are right now very handy and useful to get more data. Just type a name and you get their data and statics and everything, which I think helps a lot. But chat gpts and these AI tools are also not modeled to get the correct data. So right now, because it's not freely available on the internet, so these tools also have to be
Is missing. Yeah, the LLMs don't have that built in.
correct. I feel we first need more data for fan creation, and second is more writing about more noise generation, more narrative change around parasports and disability, where
Mhm.
athletes can do it on their own social media, and then media can take a note of it. And
Yeah.
I think it's also about people. People also have to. I mean, again, like I love to follow other para sports. I love following my other athletes. I put a follow button, and I love to have the news of what's happening into their lives. So I think just social media is amazing. Just one follow button, and you can know the story of what's happening, how things are, what people are doing in their free time, how are they training, what are they doing. So I enjoy doing that. I would appreciate if more people are interested in knowing these journeys of athletes, because we are not some sub story for people to feel good when they read us our stories. We are athletes at the end of the day. Our stories are as important as everyone else, but we are athlete first. Our medals speak for itself. A lot of, I mean, I've seen a lot of change in government's policies, but then it
Mm.
takes a lot of time to convince government to change those policies. Right now it has happened, but then again they have got old, and now we need more update.
Right. And also the
So
CSR funding. Sorry, Manis, I just wanted to bring this in here, right? The CSR funding, sponsorship, all this should support funds for not just during those main events, but there's lots of expenses, right, that you incur, support staff, rehab, mental health, nutrition, even the post career planning. So, if you can build that ecosystem, and if you can maybe also mention the cost of some of the equipment that you require, right, for para athletes, the prosthetics and other things. And these are not made in India, it's imported at this point in time if you want quality products, right? So if you can just touch upon that. So I think the funding for whoever's listening, right, there is a huge potential in market here to be able to kind of R&D in the long term, to have products made in India as part of the Atmanirbhar. But if you're looking at an athlete currently who requires equipment, it has to be important and this imported, and this is all goes into the lakhs, right? So if you can just touch upon
correct.
that,
So let me
Manas.
just break. Yeah, I'd love to break it down for you and maybe just give you numbers, but these are the numbers for 30th of December of 2025 as we talk about. So when the cost is the same for every athlete with or without disability, but we have an additional cost of prosthetic. Now my prosthetic for an above knee amputee, I have for one prosthetic knee, I have to spend more than 20 lakhs every 7 to 10 years. Then for my foot, I have to spend again 2.5 lakh for the foot. I have to keep on getting my knee serviced, and I have to send it to Germany after every maybe right now I'm having a warranty for 6 years, but after that I will have to send it to Germany, which will be billed at 3.5 to 4 lakh for that particular year. So this cost of servicing is also very high. And this is just the prosthetic for walking. I use different prosthetic for running, different prosthetic for playing badminton. These also we need to keep on replacing it. Now for physio sessions also, per session, if we do 3 to 4 sessions a week, per session we have to, for 1 hour we spend 3 to 5,000 rupees. Now we have to spend that much amount for a week, imagine. So, and also when we are going for training, the cost of equipment, cost of shuttles, the cost of traveling to go to training. I train 2 times, so I have to travel 4 times in a day. I usually take an Uber, or I have to get a rented car, whatever, but usually take an Uber if I don't have a rented car. And I mean, again, the cost of going, coming, waiting for a car, calling this driver, all these are additional costs. And then also, there are so many different costs of right now, because we are elite athletes, we get training a lot of time for free. But then for others, they have to pay more than 30 to 50,000 per month for coaching, for food, for nutrition. I mean, the costs are enormous and people don't consider this cost. And when people say that, oh, these people are receiving cash awards from the government, so government is doing a great job. But the cost of us spending that kind of a money is far more than the amount of money that people receive as cash awards from the government. These are for prosthetic users. Again, the costs are different for different kind of disabilities. For some, the costs are negligible. For some, the costs are much more higher. You also need to have somebody who, like people who require assistance and support, they have to have one person travel with them, somebody who can help or escort them. So government also has to take. So these are the type, and government does take care of a lot of funds for us when we are elite athletes. But again, like I really worry what is going to happen in future after I retire. My cost of prosthesis is never going to change. It's only going to increase with inflation again. And I feel I'm doing well in the field of sport. I have secured job. I come from well-to-do family, where I know how to take care of my current funding. But then again, the cost of my prosthesis is so high that I worry what's going to happen when I'm in my 50s and 60s and 70s, and how am I going to deal with my age. So, and also because sports does damage your body, it does a lot of times, it puts you under a lot of medical consideration. So I think, yeah, I mean, these are just the figures that I would like to be enlightening you and everybody who's listening.
Right. So I think sponsorship could be across the board, right? I mean, it could be either for an equipment, it could be for helping with the nutrition, it could be with support. So there's a lot of areas where even philanthropy or sponsorship or CSR funding in any form, right? The government can't be the only one doing it. And this is what I would like our listeners to also understand, that the government has done its bit in terms of bringing it sport to where it is, but I think this is where the markets can, and there is a business case here. The markets should step in, look at different types of ways in which para sport can be supported as well, right? And storytelling, as you mentioned, I think that's a very key part where the media has to play a larger role. So I want us to just finally look at this samaj, right? The society, the culture, because the social attitudes can be the hardest barrier for many, and the stigma still sort of persists, as you know. So what would you say, right, for listeners and for everyone out there, what role should families and communities play in even schools, for that matter, in enabling or para sport participation, or even just encouraging people with disabilities to do physical activity?
So I think for people with disabilities, there are two most important barriers that exist. One is physical barrier, and other is societal barrier. Physical barrier, like we understand, the world is not designed for us, or our country right now is not designed to take care of us, and we try to navigate around it. But the societal barriers that exist in a society, it hurts the person the most. Now, when I talk about it, look, what we can do is have more inclusive mindset, have more appreciation. We all should understand that the world is not designed for one particular group. The world is designed for everyone. We all face one or the other hardship for some particular time. Some people face more, some people less. We all live in a society. We all have to take care of each other. We are not individuals. We live in a society. And it's our responsibility to make sure that everybody is living their best possible life, their happy life. Now, I really love that word, pursuit of happiness, where we where we say, right, we all want to pursue happiness, but why is my happiness is my I sometimes feel why my happiness is not the priority for people and only somebody else's happiness. So I really wish that we design our society to make sure that everyone remains happy, and that is where the removal of social barrier comes into picture. One is through inclusive mindset in schools and colleges, at workplace and education, everywhere else. A lot of times what happens is people hire people with disabilities, but then promotions are one of the biggest challenges. People feel कि हाँ हम लोग ने इनको इतना तो दे दिया ना, इनको इतना इनको the othering of people with disabilities is one of the biggest reason why people feel left out. People like us feel left out. We are all as involved into whatever we are doing as everyone else, but people feeling कि आप नहीं दूसरे generation कर लेंगे. But then it is, I mean, for people with disabilities, that other generation is a very different concept, because it's not necessary that my children will have a disability.
Right.
So and people also have that feel good factor कि हमने इनको इतनी मदद कर दी, हमने इनके लिए कुछ कर दिया. So that othering thing.
Kind of also, right? The pity that comes with it, which I think, like you mentioned, right, ensuring that the inclusivity, we're sensitizing the society, because the moment we start looking at them and us, sort of, right, and putting people in different categories, it doesn't make for even things like dignity and giving a person the opportunity. It should be done coming from that space of, yeah, we're given an opportunity for another person, not necessarily it's from it's a PWD, right?
Correct.
So I think, yeah, no, I think you've touched upon some excellent points. So if you were to look at, just closing, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, but roughly if you want to look at the Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar and how we can align all of these towards a shared goal for Parasport, what do you think it could be?
No, I feel this is why one of the biggest reason why I have a huge appreciation for para sports, and I have kept on pursuing or playing the sport for such a long time, is because I feel sport has a very good opportunity to create that inclusive mindset. Because when Olympics and Paralympics happen together, and it's for the world to see that we
Right.
can do it, everybody can do it. Like the host Olympic, like host, right from host countries to the world bodies, to everybody, from athlete to athletes, everybody can work together to make the whole event successful. I think organizations and corporates and governments and everything else can take an example of how we can do it together. Like how can we live in an inclusive world, because there are examples. Another thing which I really appreciate about parasports is that it shows the resilience of human body in spite of the challenges that exist, and how we as humans are able to evolve, be more resilient. It's such a great example that we see from athletes right across the board, from all age groups. And it's so that I feel, as an athlete also, even when I look at my past story, I feel so inspired of what I've done in my past. When I see younger athletes, I really feel inspired, and I feel this is the story that I would like to tell the world to appreciate, because there is a lot of times we forget the humanity part when we are doing things, and this parasports is a reminder that
Right.
we all should be living, having that inclusive thought. And I want everybody to experience how parasports are happening. I think everybody should take out time from their schedule and go and watch the nearest parasport events happening there in their city, or just buy tickets and go and cheer for para athletes, because it is going to change your perspective on a lot of things. What I appreciate about parasports is how narrative building and how narrative changes have happened over the years, which have now created that society where government is boldly saying that we are going to have this, we want to host the next Olympics and Paralympics, and we will make sure that whichever city we are going to host in, that is Ahmedabad, we are going to make sure that that city and that country, I mean our country, will be more inclusive for all the people who will be coming to watch, support, and again play. So I think it's a great example for all of us to see and live.
Absolutely right. And like they say, right, the rising tide lifts all boats, and hoping with the Commonwealth 2030 around the corner. And then if we get the Olympics, whether it's 2036 or 20 maybe even later, right? That's fine. But I think at some point, the fact that Parasport is here and it's here to stay, and I enjoy watching it. I mean, I still remember every time after the Olympics is done, the Paralympics is being aired, I always kind of make sure that I tune into all the channels. And I feel, like you mentioned correctly, that media too, the storytelling, the narratives, the fact that the markets will kick in once there's a demand. Right? It's as simple as that. So we as society should just go support, watch more of the sport, support our fellow para-athletes, and even PWDs, people with disabilities, ensure that we're more inclusive in our approach. Right? And that definitely makes a difference. So thanks, Manasi. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up, it sort of feels like we're watching Indian sport mid-stride, right? Not at the finish line. So the rules, the money, the systems that are slowly getting better, but that only matters if they open doors for para-athletes. And we saw that in our discussion here. So the real win is when we stop seeing disability through the lens of pity and start seeing, their personalities and their potential. So as I mentioned, if this rising tide in Indian sport is for real, then this should make ramps as common as scoreboards when we're looking at accessibility. We should have adaptive equipment as easily accessible as maybe a cricket t-shirts, which is available everywhere, right? And when this happens, right, Parasport won't be a side story anymore, and it'll just be a sport, and that's the future that this conversation is really about. So thank you so much, Manasi. Thank you so much for making your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to Takshashila School for also including me. It was a great evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Manasi. And a Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Wish you have a great 2026.
Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone who've been listening in. Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.